Medieval timeline. Historical events preceded by C are approximations based on given information and are not to be considered exact dates, and may be subject to change as new information is given. Events marked as unknown are also approximations, and their placement in the timeline could be entirely wrong. 74 million years ago, an Albertosaurus is born and/or dies. 72 million years ago, a Diplodocus is born and/or dies. 70 million years ago, a Centrosaurus is born and/or dies. 66 million years ago, a Triceratops is born and/or dies. Unknown. A few places in the world/universe of Medieval started to have mythical creatures. A universe of magic began. Unknown. The Hall of Heroes is created as an exclusive club with access paid for by only the greatest of these. Who runs the place? We don't know. Unknown. Raven Hooves the Archer is born somewhere in Gaul, ancient France. He descended from the finest centaur bloodstock. Raven Hooves the Archer was the last prince of his people. Unknown. A proud and haughty aristocrat, he was an accomplished hunter, sportsman, duelist, playboy, rancour, and 3 times Derby winner. C. 87th century BC. Raven Hooves the Archer, last prince of the Centaurs, lies before or around this time. He is the first known hero. It isn't known if there are others there from the medieval universe/world to be awarded a place in the Hall of Heroes. C. 114 BC. Yama is born and/or dies. Unknown. The island of Ganymed was named and later became a kingdom, joining the other 8 kingdoms of medieval Britain. Famed from its lush green countryside, fair rulers, and kindly people. It was also home to many mystical and mythical creatures, like dragon toads, rhinotaurs, and dragon birds. Unknown. The ancients are born. Unknown. The ancients trap the strong magical energy that emanates from Ganymed in runestones, which they use as keys. It is possible that they also erected the mystic maidens, as the maidens have the rune symbols carved into them. C. 1303 BC. Ramesses II is born somewhere in Egypt. 1279 BC. Ramesses II becomes pharaoh of Egypt. C. 1232 BC. Kia is born somewhere in Egypt. 1213 BC. Kia is selected to be one of Ramesses II's wives. However, Ramesses II dies before their marriage is consummated. Nevertheless, Kia is selected to accompany him on his journey to the afterlife. She is interred in a tomb at Habu Simbel. Unknown. Ganymed is likely occupied by the Roman Empire at some point. C. 4th century. Some scholars believe that Raven Hooves the Archer, last prince of the Centaurs, died before or around this time instead. C. 9th century. The Count is born somewhere in Eastern Europe before or around this time. The Count years later. Unknown. Malamede, one of Ganymed's towns and cities, is destroyed by the rhinotaurs in what would become known as the Massacre of Malamede. Malamede, now known as the Lake, was once a town of arcane alchemy, before being destroyed by rhinotaurs and flooded by the murky swamps. The people of this Spanish town once sought to harness the power of crystals within the crystal caves. The city now lies in ruin. Unknown, the king of Galamir is born. Unknown, Miss is born somewhere in Galamir. Unknown, she marries a lord called Fortescue II and becomes a lady, if she wasn't already. c. 1218. The king's son, Prince Peregrine, is born in Galamir around this time. c. 1220. Demonoid is born and/or dies. 1222. The Sea Dogs Charter of 1222 is issued, making it a requirement for pirates to have a bird companion. Unknown. Zarok is born somewhere in Galamir. Unknown. Lady and Lord Fortescue II had, as far as some of us know, probably they had more children, a son named Cedric Fortescue, born somewhere in Galamir. Unknown. Zarok had a puppy called Mr. Snuffy. Unknown. Zarok and Mr. Snuffy spent many sunny days together, playing fields of wheat and splashing across streams. Zarok was a smart but scrawny boy who came from a poor family in Galamir. His childhood days were spent with Mr. Snuffy, his canine companion. c. 1233. The king of Galamir, Prince Peregrine's father, choked to death on a piece of undercooked turnip, forcing the young Peregrine to ascend the throne. c. 1233. Prince Peregrine is crowned as the new king at age 15. Snuffy's life was cut short on Prince Peregrine's coronation day when he began chasing a cat. The cat and dog ran into the royal procession and straight towards the prince's carriage. While the cat managed to get away unseen, Mr. Snuffy wasn't so lucky. The prince's guards secured Mr. Snuffy, as they were under the impression that the hound was about to attack the prince's carriage. This event served as a catalyst for Zarok's hatred for the brand new King Peregrine and his obsession with necromancy. Zarok later leaves Galamir to become an evil sorcerer's apprentice. Unknown. Zarok's master was an infamous dark sorcerer who took Zarok on as his apprentice at some point after King Peregrine's coronation. Little is known about him, save for the fact that he did not live in Galamir. 1236. The first Galamir games take place this year. Unknown. King Peregrine's champion is born somewhere in Galamir. Unknown. A mother is born, presumably in Galamir. Unknown. Stania Ironhewer is born, presumably in Galamir. Unknown. Blood Monarch Skullclaver is born a humble peasant to one of the nomadic tribes from the Eastlands. Unknown. Woden the Mighty is born, probably somewhere in Germania, Germany, or Scania, Scandinavia, precisely in Norway. Unknown. Karl Stungard is born, most likely in Germania, Germany. Unknown. Dirk Steadfast is born, probably in Liverpool. Unknown. Himanzi Shongama is born somewhere in Amazonia. Unknown. Magwine Stormbinder is born. Unknown. Lord Cedric Fortescue III marries. He is the head of the Fortescue family. He is said to have been the richest nobleman in the land. Unknown. Cardok is born, also from a lord family, probably somewhere in Hungary. 1254. The first child of Lord Cedric Fortescue III and his wife, and the grandson of Lord Fortescue II and Lady Fortescue, who is later referred as Granny Fortescue. Daniel Wigginbottom Fortescue is born in the kingdom of Galamir. Unknown. Lord Cedric fathered several children, with Daniel, now referred as Dan, becoming the eldest one. Unknown. Cardux's sister is born. Unknown. Lord Cedric would support Daniel financially, and most probably his other children too. Unknown. Mazak the Muddle is born somewhere in Galamir. Unknown. As a child, Cardux's sister was allowed to attend clogging lessons by her parents. Not much else is known about Cardux's sister's later life. Little is known about Cardux's early life either, save for the fact that his parents, the lords, didn't allow him to attend clogging lessons with his sister, which might have led to his violent disposition in later life. Unknown. All that's known about Granny Fortescue is that she made pumpkin pie and that she often received a hip bath. Unknown. Dan was a spoiled and bratty child who grew up to be a lazy, arrogant teenager. Daniel decided to become a knight solely to impress the maidens. He trained with the best weapons masters in the land, showing a degree of natural talent, but was too lazy to ever deliver on his potential. At some point in his life, he took a dog called Lupo. With financially backing courtesy of his father, Dan rose through the ranks of the king's army. Unknown. Carduck became a lord, just like his parents. Unknown. A mother had a child in Galamir named Canitim. She lost her jaw back when Canitim was still just a baby. She struggled with saying the letter K as a result. Unknown. In addition to being the strongest man who ever lived, Stania Ironhewer was unsurpassed in his skill as a blacksmith. He was equally happy pounding on his anvil at home as he was pounding on someone's head in battle. It was said that his only fear was the end of the village smithy as the focus of manufacture in favor of more centralized units, as if. Unknown. Lord Monarch Skull Cleaver gathered an army of horsemen and swept over half the civilized world. When he finally died, attempting a single-handed attack on a garrison in the north while armed only with the spike on his helmet, he was the richest and most powerful peasant of his day. He was another hero that was also granted a place in a hall of heroes. Unknown. Truly the hero's hero, Warden the Mighty was fearless, single-minded, and uncompromising. Unbeaten in combat, inspired raw fear in friends and enemies alike, not to mention in close family members and pets. Unknown. Karl Stungard spent most of his formative years under siege at his family castle. With his impregnable magic shield, Stungard's motto was the best form of attack is defense. Sadly, his shields couldn't protect him from poor eating habits, and he died during a post-battle feast while swallowing a large sausage he had failed to chew. He was still granted a place in the Hall of Heroes. Not much is known about Dirk's early life. At some point he forged his magic sword. He was a contemporary of Karl Stungard, and the two were friends despite their differences. Dirk is indirectly responsible for Karl's death, as Karl started choking on a sausage after Dirk started explaining his views on the gold shield. Unknown. Trained from birth in all forms of combat, Himanzi Chongama was the warrior queen of a tribe of Amazons. The bold and beautiful Shongama banished all males from her territory except the handful she kept on to mow the lawns of the people. Unknown. A full-time mother and homemaker, Megwine Stonebinder, and to defend a settlement from barbarian raiders while the menfolk were away on a hunting trip. She fought off repeated attacks armed only with a pitchfork and a rolling pin, and with one arm holding a baby. Legend has it that the gods, impressed by her indomitable courage, intervened and added thunderbolts to her arsenal. She won the battle with a couple of bolts to spare on her husband when he finally returned. C. 1283, 50 years after Peregrine's coronation, A terrible famine sweeps over Gallowmere. Zarok returned to Gallowmere, causing the land's crops to fail in order to expose the incompetency of Peregrine's court magician, Mazok the Muddled. The king tasks his court magician, Mazok the Muddled, to come up with the solution. Mazok's attempts led to the creation of the Jabberwocky. Peregrine ordered Mazok to boost the sickly pumpkin crop, but Mazok's spells backfired, turning the pumpkins into monsters. Mazok's subsequent plan involved transforming a dragon egg into a chicken, which created the Jabberwocky. The hatched chicken dragon, or Jabberwocky as it came to be known, possessed the ferocity of a dragon and the dimwit of a chicken. It rampaged through the kingdom on a murderous spree and killed so many that even the meager harvest was enough to sustain the survivors as they mourned their loved ones. It is unknown what happened to Mazok afterwards. It is possible that he was one of the Jabberwocky's first victims. King Peregrine hires Zarok to be his new court magician, who single-handedly makes the famine disappear. Unknown, between 1283 and 1285, as part of his secret plot to take over the kingdom, Zarok would go on to kill the king's champion by spooking the champion's horse with a toad, causing him to be thrown in a well where he drowned. Zarok then convinced the king to appoint none other than Daniel Fortescue IV to be his new champion, which Dan also had the help of his father in rising through the ranks of King Peregrine's army, as Zarok knew that Fortescue was incompetent and would doom the king's army during his planned invasion. From that point on, Dan was known as Sir Daniel Wiggingbottom Fortescue IV. Unknown. At some point, Zarok summoned shadow demons from another dimension to help him build a vast castle on top of a faraway mountain. Unknown. Between 1283 and 1285. At some point, Kardok affiliated himself with the evil sorcerer Zarok, becoming his champion. Unknown. Between 1283 and 1285, Canitim's mother also used to tell Canitim the story about how the Jabberwocky was made. Not much else is known about her. Unknown. Between 1284 and 1285, Lord Cedric would support Daniel financially into his 30s after helping him rise through the ranks of King Peregrine's army. At some point, the king, after realizing that Dan is a lazy bastard, supposedly promised Cedric that Dan's role as his champion would not entail any actual fighting. What became of Cedric after this is unknown. 1285. Canitim wins top prizes in every single archery category during the 49th Gallowmere Games, which prompts King Peregrine to offer Tim a place in his army. The king made Canitim a sharpshooter of an arbalist, part of the cavalry led by Sir Dan, as well as Dan's second in command. Some scholars believe that the people of Gallowstown clamored for a democracy at this time. Unknown. At some point, Sir Dan's dog Lupo had been bit by one of the forest wolves. He later became a were-dog. Dan never suspected about this. 1286. Gangrene is born and Or dies. Original timeline. 1286. At some point in 1286, Zarok planned an assault on Gallowmere. 1286. A day before his planned assault on the land, Zarok informed the king and his champion, Sir Daniel, about the approaching horde of undead. The king, unfortunately knowing how Dan's butt needed him since he was the king's last resort, told him that Dan and his gallant men are Gallowmere's only hope of salvation. Nervous Dan replied to the king that the king himself promised to his daddy that there'd be no actual fighting since he's afraid of monsters. Then Dan asked the king if repelling the undead horde wasn't the job of his magician. but Zarok replying only making excuses about why he cannot stop them. As part of his plan to weaken the king's army, Zarok made the Jabberwocky attack the castle. He was surprised when the Jabberwocky was chased away by Dirk Steadfast, who poked it with his magic sword. Under the cover of night, Zarok's dark army spilled forth from their corrupt haven. The army marched south across the Silver Mountains and through the Silver Woods. Zarok's army had eventually overtaken the Floodlands. This led to the Battle of Galamir in the next day. In the morning, nervous Dan, his second-in-command Canny Tim, and their army made their way to the castle to prepare for the battle. Without other option left, Daniel led the king's army against Zarok's undead horde. The Battle of Galamir had started. As the battle began, Sir Daniel Fortescue was felled to the ground, struck in the eye by the very first arrow fired. Galamir's militia pushed on, however, fighting for victory without Dan's leadership. Canny Tim, Daniel's second-in-command, managed to kill Zarok's champion, Lord Karduk, who some sources describe that Lord Karduk was the one who was personally responsible for the death of Sir Daniel Fortescue, King Peregrine's champion at the Battle of Galamir. Canny Tim shot Lord Karduk in the eye from 1,000 yards away, killing him instantly, just like Sir Daniel. According to one account, Tim's death came prematurely at the hands of Zarok himself. Galamir's army was ultimately victorious. Although Zarok's body was never found, he was thought to be dead and was proclaimed as such to the people of Galamir. Zarok survived the battle, however. He remained in hiding, preparing for a second invasion. Canny Tim earned his place in the Hall of Heroes after death for shooting Lord Karduk's eye, thus killing him from 1,000 yards away, and for the victory of the Battle of Galamir. And the unholy shadow demons that remain in the mortal world were trapped underneath the enchanted earth. By decree of King Peregrine, their tomb sealed with what became known as the Shadow Artifact. The king designed an impregnable box that would house Zarok's 9 indestructible shadow demons and sealed the box using the Shadow Artifact, thanks to another great hero. Embarrassed by Dan's poor performance in the battle, the king saved face by proclaiming Dan a hero and attributed the day's victory to him. Realizing his subjects needed to feel safe and to honor Dan's memory, Peregrine declared that Daniel had defeated Zarok before his demise. A hero's tomb was soon erected to Dan. The history books inscribed him with tales of his valor. And the graveyard was also named after him. King Peregrine passed away not long afterwards. He died from choking on a Brussels sprout. Morton was a friendly worm that lived inside Dan's skull. Nothing is known about Morton before he came to inhabit the skull of Sir Dan. It is said that he was happy when Dan died, suggesting that he was alive before Dan's death in 1286. Unknown. Sometime around the beginning of the 14th century. Sometime after Dan's death, Zarok discovered a book of black magic which would become associated with him. Unknown. Sometime around the 14th century. Over the years, Stania Ironhewer, Woden the Mighty, Dirk Steadfast, Himanzi Shongama, and Megwine Stormbinder would join Ravenhooves the Archer, Lord Monnet Skullcleaver, Carl Stonguard, Canny Tim, and probably amongst other heroes that we don't know about in the afterlife. All together and finally recognized as heroes of Earth in the Hall of Heroes. They would spend their time feasting, drinking, and arm wrestling. Dan wasn't awarded a place in the Hall of Heroes since he died before doing anything in the Battle of Galamir. He became a joke for most of the heroes that ascended to the hall up there. He wasn't a truly unworthy hero, and that's why he never ascended to the higher level of this hall. Unknown, sometime around the end of the 14th century, Zarok also gained possession of the Shadow Artifact, the key to the tomb where his shadow demons were imprisoned. The town mayor was elected head of Gallows Town in the late 14th century. The town mayor was a lusty adventurer in his heyday. He stole the shadow artifact from the evil sorcerer Zarok almost a century after Zarok's banishment from Galamir, before Zarok could free them. 3083. War Tilda wins the jolliest witch in Galamir War, beginning a winning streak. 3086. Watilda joins the jolliest witch in Galamir Award for the 4th consecutive year. Zarok returns to conquer Galamir once again. To be continued.